doing this! What? Not nice! There's a giant head! You hear yourself? I made like 2,000 of these. I'd like to have fun. With you wherever you are, welcome to LFR. A trade! The Toronto Maple Leafs trade Denis Malgin to the Colorado Avalanche in exchange for Dryden Hunt. Now, usually a Toronto Maple Leafs trade with the Colorado Avalanche, that is like Christmas for this YouTube channel because I cheer for the Toronto Maple Leafs and producer Drew cheers for the Colorado Avalanche. And this trade happens, we're texting back and forth, and so what do you know? And we're both like, In fact, this trade broke just as Jesse and I were finishing recording the podcast, and even we were like, I barely know anything. Done a little bit of research, though, on the reasoning and the potential upside for both teams, so let's talk about it. Real quick, think you know which way it's gonna go? Like, for example, will Denis Malgin get a hat trick against the Leafs when they play, like, in 2 weeks? Make your bet at Sports Interaction. When the puck drops, Sports Interaction has you covered pre-game, live betting on all major sports, and prop bets. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. That's sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. So, Denis Malgin for Dryden Hunt. Let's talk about it. Now, hopefully Dryden Hunt is good for the Toronto Maple Leafs because it will be an awful anti-feather for Kyle Dubas to say he lost both Denis Malgin trades. And because of the original Denis Malgin trade, Denis Malgin has been this weird figure in the Leafs fan base for a long time. The Leafs had Mason Marchment, and he was this big guy and the son of a former Toronto Maple Leaf, and there was some fanfare with that. He could provide something that this team lacks, in his first few games with the Leafs were actually pretty good. Then at the end of the day, they decided there wasn't much of a future for this guy, wasn't much opportunity, so let's trade him. And the Leafs do trade him to the Florida Panthers in exchange for Denis Malgin. Now, on the surface, I loved that deal. At the time, Denis Malgin was just shy of 200 games played and younger than Mason Marchment, who had less than a dozen NHL games to his name. Difficult to lose that trade. I was in the building for Denis Malgin's Leafs debut. That was a 4-0 win against the Penguins. And no one remembers that because the very next game, the Leafs lost to David Ayres and the Carolina Hurricanes. What followed that was obviously a COVID shutdown of the entire world, not just the hockey world. But when we emerged from that COVID lockdown, Denis Malgin was not in a Leaf uniform. He opted to go back to Switzerland because who wouldn't want to be closer to home during all that? Whereas Mason Marchment's productivity with the Florida Panthers absolutely exploded. He became an extremely positive influence and part of the Florida Panthers en route to a President's Trophy, and it was such a good performance that it earned him a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract with the Dallas Stars. Malgin, on the other hand, just got back to North America this season, and after the preseason that he had, and it was a fantastic preseason. Everyone's like, look out! Malgin Hive, rise up! Remember all that? I think he even scored in the Leafs' first game of the season, didn't he? Things were looking up for Denis Malgin as a Leaf. It looked like he maybe wasn't going to be Mason Marchment, but he was going to be a regular, positive contributor to the Leafs lineup. The Leafs are recently coming off of one of the best stretches they've had in years. Like they just could not lose, and if they did, they at least got a point out of it every single time. And it was slightly incredible how little Denis Malgin had to do with it, not even getting in the lineup most games. A few things worked against Denis Malgin. Number one, the bottom six, and he's not exactly a bottom six player, was doing great without him. Pierre Engvall is now probably taking over the spot that he should be in, which is third line right winger. He has always played his best hockey on David Kamp's wing, probably the right one. Can play the left, but he's often on the right, and he does a good job there. So all right, well, you're not taking Nylander's job, and you're not taking Marner's job, so there's the third line job. Oh, that's Pierre Engvall's now. And then there's the fourth line right wing job. And it's just a rotating cast, and it's obviously not the best spot for Malgin. But the spot he was in most recently was second line left wing, because there is an opening there. Calle Järnkrok, he fit into that slot, and he gets hurt. Okay, so he gets taken out of that slot. Nick Robertson, let's see what he can do in that slot, and he's hurt. So then in comes Denis Malgin, the only dude in that bottom six situation who really seems to have the upside in terms of offensive skill on the wing, but he's playing his off wing, and he's just not a fit on that line at all with Marner and Tavares, and it was painfully obvious as they got picked apart by the Washington Capitals last game. And Connor Timmins, a former Avalanche draft pick, weighs into this equation as well, because I've seen some fans talking about, well, are the Leafs going to place him on waivers when the Leafs get some injury luck back, some recoveries, like Morgan Rielly returns to the lineup and maybe a Jordy Ben or a Victor Mete, when they come back to the lineup, is Connor Timmins going to potentially get put on waivers? Well, when Timmins was traded to the Leafs, he had 7 points in his entire career. Since joining the Leafs, he has 6! So I think the Leafs are going to move heaven and earth to keep Connor Timmins a Toronto Maple Leaf and not have to put him on waivers, because I have a hard time believing he would go unclaimed. Denis Malgin, once the Leafs get a little healthier, which they are now because Calle Jarnkrok is coming off of IR, where's this guy going to end up? Probably on waivers, where you probably lose him for nothing. The Leafs have a difficult relationship with waivers, because it seems every time the Leafs place a player on waivers, they get claimed. And every time a good player gets put on waivers, the Leafs are doing too well and they're way too far back in the waiver pecking order to claim anybody. That's how they got Connor Timmins, is they didn't get him off waivers. He was going to get waived, and the Leafs beat the waiver wire to the punch and made a deal with the Arizona Coyotes, offering them a player instead of them losing Connor Timmins for nothing. It was a smart move. That's probably what the Colorado Avalanche and Toronto Maple Leafs did here. 2 players who were probably going to end up on waivers. Dryden Hunt was already on waivers this year. That's how he became a member of the Colorado Avalanche. He was with the New York Rangers last year, got put on waivers earlier this season, and got claimed. The Avalanche probably get a player in Malkin that can help them now, because right now the Avalanche, who are the reigning Stanley Cup champions, I know, are deficient in skill. Why are they deficient in skill? Because they're deficient in healthy players. Everybody's hurt. The Leafs have that problem on the back end. The Avalanche have that problem everywhere. The Avalanche are a world of hurt up front. He's probably most comfortable at right wing, but I know he's capable of playing center. He just didn't do it much in Toronto. The Avs could use some help there too. We'll see how that works out. Not really sure. He might get some power play opportunities. That was another thing that he lost towards the end of his tenure with the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was just obvious there wasn't a spot for him on this team. And sometimes that comes down to just a lack of fit. What we saw recently and what we've seen all season, Jimmy Vesey's been a really good contributor on the New York Rangers. Not necessarily offensively, except for the 2 goals in the Leaf game, but he's been a really solid defensive forward for them. With the Leafs, he was a really solid nothing. He wasn't anything. He didn't fit the team. Dryden Hunt doesn't have the upside of a Denis Malgin, but he's probably a better fit for what the Toronto Maple Leafs want to be, because despite the Leafs' softer to play against reputation, Dryden Hunt and being bigger and more belligerent and more grinding, that's what the Leafs want to be. That's what they want out of their bottom 6. They want a Zach Aston Reese type, and that is what Dryden Hunt is. Dryden Hunt, by the way, is something else that Kyle Dubas loves. No, not a Sault Ste. Marie Greyhound. He played in the WHL. He is an undrafted player. Story goes, as I'm told, the Florida Panthers signed Dryden Hunt. Now, the scouts didn't like a lot of things about his game. They don't like his skating. We don't think it's going to translate to the NHL level. But the very smart people in the Florida Panthers organization said, yes, but he scored 58 goals in the WHL last year. 58 goals! Yes, Dryden Hunt was an overager, and he played a very rare 5 seasons in the WHL, but in his final WHL campaign, in 72 games, he had 58 goals. I don't care what your scouting report says, that's the sort of player you take a look at, and you call, and you say, hey, do you like playing hockey? And if they say yes, you ask them, would you like to play hockey for us? Now, is he the type of player who scores 58 goals in the National Hockey League? No. There is offense there. It wasn't just a flash in the pan in the WHL. There is offense there. He had 23 goals in 58 games and then 23 goals in 51 games with the Springfield Thunderbirds of the American Hockey League. Those goal totals put him second on his team and third on his team in those respective AHL seasons. That's not nothing. Here's another piece of good news. Last season, Dryden Hunt set career highs in goals, and assists and points at the NHL level. The bad news, those highs were 6 goals, 11 assists, and 17 points in 76 games for the New York Rangers. I don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs acquired Dryden Hunt because they think he's a Denis Malgin replacement. I think he's just a better fit for this team. I think they'll find ways to get him games. I wouldn't expect to see him alongside John Tavares and Mitch Marner anytime soon because, again, Calle Järnkrok, who fit into that slot just fine before he got a groin injury, will be returning there. Here's what some people more familiar with Dryden Hunt's game from the Rangers had to say. From Hey Shay, with Hunt, it's interesting to see the difference in his usage pre and post New York versus his time there. He's a fine utility forward, but Colorado/Toronto better show where he actually fits on a deep team. And she links to some charts and statistics that seem to show Dryden Hunt is a rather useful defensive player, but there's not a ton there offensively at the NHL level. From Cam Sharon, responding to Hey Shay, my question here is whether the Leafs see Hunt as more of a forechecking presence than Malgin was. I get the sense that they really like what they have in Aston Reese and want another one of him. Cam is probably right in his analysis here. After all, he did work the last 8 seasons for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and now here he is back on Twitter. The Leafs and Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas love a forechecker. Absolutely love it. And there's nothing wrong with seeing if a guy who, by all the videos I've seen, appears to be pretty good at that, can do that for you. Keeping in mind that your 2 bottom 6 left wingers right now are Alexander Kerfoot on the 3rd line, interesting, and on the 4th line, Zach Aston Reese, who has fit in wonderfully on this team, might I add, and now with Pontus Holmberg after David Kampf. From Adam Herman, this is a lot of analysis from the Rangers writer. Here's what Toronto Maple Leafs fans can expect with Dryden Hunt. He's the one guy who actually fits the mold that boomers and the old guard media want on the 4th line, but for whatever reason, they'll ignore it. He has no hands, but he'll grind play to a halt and keep the puck behind the goal line for an entire shift until the Matthews or Tavares line can come on with fresh legs and neutral zone possession following a dump out. Then Herman posts a clip, and I can't show you that because it's illegal to show NHL footage on a channel that doesn't own the NHL footage, but he describes it. This is my favorite Dryden Hunt play. One of the least skilled guys in the league went 1 versus 4 mid-change against the Avalanche, in which any touch would kill the play. And he somehow kept it alive for the Zibanejad line just through sheer will. Listen, I'm not here to tell you he's going to be an incredible Toronto Maple Leaf, but he does sound like a really good fit for what they want out of the bottom 6. And maybe even a few shifts or a few games alongside Tavares and Marner. It's a possibility just to have him as a puck retriever guy. No, I do not think that is a good long-term solution, but you never know. And lastly, but not leastly, let's all laugh at Kyle Cushman for buying this reverse retro Denis Malgin jersey. LMAO, Kyle! LMAO! You're not the only Kyle to have buyer's remorse related to Denis Malgin. So, what do you think of this trade? Leave a comment in the comment box down below. Let me know which period in which you think Denis Malgin will score the Stanley Cup winning goal for the Colorado Avalanche, and how soon will he have a hat trick against the Toronto Maple Leafs? That's what I want to know. That is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. I can't believe I had that much to say.